Welcome to our new Beyond the 90 Florida Soccer Report, USL Super League Report. I'm Kartik, and I'm really pleased and honored that James Knowles has agreed to join us as my co-host. And for those of you who don't know, James is involved with RBLR and does their rowdy stuff. And by the way, RBLR, what does that stand for? Pretty obvious if you know what the major pro sports teams are in the Tampa Bay area. And James is going to cover the Tampa Bay Sun for us. Joins us. So welcome, James.
Yeah, thanks for including me on this show. I would like to give a quick shout out to RBLR. Obviously, that's where I started doing any coverage of soccer, and that was for the Rowdies. One of the R's there, and now with the Sun coming on board, I am doing the writing there. But I am perfectly happy and perfectly content to join you for a podcast here because I think the more coverage that we get about the Sun, the better. I think that there's actually quite a big market for it based on the attendance that we saw and all of the coverage that we saw this past weekend. So it's all very exciting.
So check out RBLR, and their Rowdies coverage is fantastic. It's in-depth. It's really detailed. And it's probably one of the best independent coverage we have of any USL championship club. High level stuff. I mean, Tampa Bay has always produced, I think, better independent coverage of lower division soccer, unused subs in the past, and all of that, right? So something definitely in the water in the Bay Area. You guys cover it like so few others do.
Well, we do try to get as much, like you said, we try to get exactly as deep as we can with the coverage here, and that includes actually talking with the team. So I think that that's helpful because, unfortunately, it is the case that frequently it is just RBLR Sports that's in the post-game press conference. So,
right.
It's one of those things where I guess if we are going to be the ones that get that coverage and put it out there, then I'm glad to be the ones doing it.
That's a great segue, James, because let's start. We'll get to Fort Lauderdale United and Spokane a little later in the show, but I'm now accustomed, starting in 2010 when I was the NASL PR director and we launched then FC Tampa Bay. I mean, our intention was always to have the team called the Rowdies, but there was a trademark dispute. We don't need to get into that, but eventually they became the Tampa Bay Rowdies. I became accustomed to what you just said, which was doing press conferences with Ricky Hill, doing press conferences with Stuart Campbell, where you had just you guys, and before you guys, the unused subs, right? That was it. Maybe you get the St. Pete Times, or now the Tampa Bay Times, occasionally. So I was just overwhelmed by the amount of media at the Tampa Bay Sun opener. Maybe we should talk about that because I know there's more of a cachet to women's soccer for some in the media. And then when you add in the layer that this is a first division team, this is a first division league, that's a hook. But I was pleasantly surprised, really pleased, but quite frankly, kind of overwhelmed by how many media members and how many local TV press showed up at the Suns opener.
Yeah, I was also quite surprised by that. I definitely would have expected somebody like Spectrum News to be there because I imagine that their office, wherever they actually do their own broadcasting from, I assume that was probably pretty close to Lake High School, but they were not the only ones. I believe that there were people from the Tampa Bay Times. I know that Creative Loafing was there, and they're a very indie publication themselves, so to see them covering a sport, specifically a team that play soccer, is really cool. I don't know all of the other people that were there. I think it was almost 10 people that were just in the post-game press conference. So that included Eureka and myself from RBLR Sports. So I definitely think that however they've gone about it, they have really achieved a very good level of hype here. Supposedly, there has been a media blitz from at least the Sun, if not the USL as a whole, to help out the Super League and the teams that make it up. But I think that they really have nailed it because the coverage is really extensive at this point, and beyond the coverage, the name recognition honestly is a big thing in soccer, especially lower division soccer in America. You could probably go to MLS cities, and people would not know those teams, like the famous the famous video of the girl hearing about the Philadelphia Union and asking, "You mean white collar workers?" There are plenty of instances of that even at the top level, let alone in the lower divisions. And as you said, USL Super League is trying to be a top division. I don't know if that is something that is totally achievable in the long run, but they appear to have all of the name recognition that a top division team would at this very early stage. And if you can do it this early on, I mean, I guess I can only expect it to go up from here, right?
Yeah, it was a shock to me to see that. And Creative Loafing, by the way, a publication that's interviewed me a number of times in some of my other roles. They are the indie publication, at least on the Tampa side, the Hillsborough side of the Bay. I actually think they do read them in Pinellas also, but especially in Hillsborough. So yeah, it was great to see them there. The Times was there. There were multiple television stations there, including Spectrum. So that was overwhelming. And then the other real takeaway from the game for me, before we get into the actual match, was that you had 80% of the fans, I would say, that already had Sun gear. They had a kit, or they had a shirt, or they had a scarf. Whereas when I've gone to the first matches for other teams in the past, and I was actually at the Rowdies, or then FC Tampa Bay's first match, which was at Steinbrenner Field in 2010 against Austin. Austin, which became Orlando, ironically enough. So that was the start of the rivalry, if you want to look at it that way. That match was a sellout also, but there were maybe 30 or 40% of the crowd, maybe not even that actually, had Rowdy stuff. I mean, there were people who wore green and gold because they knew those were the team colors, but this is the first match I've been to for a launch of a team where you've seen so many people in team gear. You haven't seen that many Premier League shirts or USWNT, USMNT shirts in the crowd. Normally, if it's a first game, people don't have their gear. They're just coming to check it out. They may not be connected to the team. It's just an event, and they wear some sort of other soccer merchandise. So that blew me away.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that the team has done that's really good in terms of recognition is, they did a very good job with the branding. I don't want to necessarily say that other teams in the USL Super League have not done as good a job, but the Tampa Bay Sun crest, in my opinion, is definitely up there for one of the best. I will say that the colors do stand out, and I think that along with getting this team in front of so many people, however many different ways they've done that, I'm assuming social media marketing as well as local news pieces, but however they've done that, they have absolutely done a very good job of getting people to buy into it, literally, with getting jerseys, just as you said, getting scarves, and everybody lined up so that they have the stuff. The only thing that I could possibly ask for more is, I know that Orlando City, when they started out in MLS, they were giving literally everybody that they could find around the stadium, and they tried to sell the big stadium out in Orlando. I think they achieved it. But the point is, they gave everybody that could find a free magnet to put on their car, and make sure that they handed out as many stickers as they could. And that's the only other thing that I would like to see is, let's get this crest on as many cars as we can. Let's get stickers on lampposts and downtown and in bars and what have you. I think that would be the only other next step to make sure that all of this blue and gold goes everywhere, that it can continue to get in front of more people.
Yeah, funny story about that. Ironically enough, March of 2015 is the first Orlando City home match. Well, first match, I guess, in MLS against New York City FC. And I had covered Orlando City previously, right, when they were in USL. So I got press credentials when they moved up to MLS initially. I park my car. I get there 3 hours early because it's going to be the huge crowd. I get back to my car after the post-game press conferences. There is a magnet on my car. Like, someone stuck it on my car. I didn't want it on there. I took it off, but I still have that magnet somewhere. So that's how, I mean, I think they had people even going through the parking lot doing it, which was remarkable. Yeah, that's great guerrilla marketing. The magnets became a thing in Orlando itself too, that it was a sign of local pride that people were putting the OCSC magnets on cars. I've never quite seen a phenomenon like that from another club, but that would be a good suggestion for the Sun. So let's talk about the match. Dallas, who on paper looked like they have a good team, albeit not a very deep team. They were the better team in the first half. They got a goal from Hannah Davison, and they were able to really control possession and create chances. But after halftime, the Sun, or really after about the 55th minute, the Sun took control of the match and were able to get that equalizer off a set piece. Brooke Hendricks had the finish, great finish, and was a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in the way the first half went. I think most fans would be. The fact to me that Dallas Trinity only scored one goal in the first half is kind of surprising, and also the fact that they got it off of a corner kick was a little surprising because there were so many chances from open play. In all honesty, it probably stays a 1-1 game because of the goalkeeper Ashley Orcus for the Tampa Bay Sun. She was incredible in this one, and her reflex saves, legitimately looking like a hockey goalkeeper out there. She was making kick saves like, I don't know, Vasilevsky for the Lightning or something. It was really a sight to see. But I think a lot of this comes down to, at the moment, you mentioned Dallas not having a lot of depth. And while that's true, I would say that most of the teams in this league are at a similar place right now. And the Tampa Bay Sun, unfortunately, are also in that same kind of place right now because they don't have several of the players that they wanted to bring in at the moment. There are rumors, I don't know if it's actually true that this is the reason, but there are rumors that it's down to visa issues at the moment.
Yes, let me just jump in for a second, James. I'll clarify that. Yeah, there are some immigration visa issues, and that it affects 4 players, from what I understand, including Jade Moore, who was probably the biggest name signing in this league, not just for Tampa Bay, but in this league. Yeah, continue.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree that once we see her out on the field, whenever that ultimately happens, she will be one of the biggest names out there. You don't get to 51 appearances for England without being a very good player. So I'm obviously looking forward to that. But in the meantime, the club has to make do with what they have, which is not to say that there aren't several talented players. There are a lot of players from out of NWSL. And today, in fact, they brought in another player on loan from NWSL, defender Talia Stauda. She was brought in on loan because there is this problem seemingly with depth already. And I think that is most demonstrated by the fact that we already had to go to a couple of academy players in this first game. Now, as you and I being fans of men's soccer in the USL setup, then we could say we're very happy when academy players not only sign for the team, but make their first appearance, start getting regular appearances. It's not something that I would have expected right off the bat for the USL Super League, just because it's not as frequent a pipeline in the women's game as it is on the men's side. So that is a positive step, but at the same time, you have to consider where we are, that academy players are already making appearances off the bench. It's not because it was just something that the coach Denise Schilte-Brown wanted to do for the sake of it. It was ultimately something that she had to do. And that's how we get a 16-year-old playing not only in one position, but actually playing out of position and then moving into another position. So it is indicative of the state of things where there are a couple of players missing. And then in addition to that, it appeared as though the preseason to the current season that has just started this weekend, I don't know if it wasn't long enough or however you would want to describe it, but there were also several players who went down with cramp, and there was one player, at least, Carly Giamona, who went off in the first half, and that was not due to cramp, that was just due to another injury, so we don't know how long term that will be at this point, of course, and these are all issues for putting together a team and getting 11 on the field, let alone 12, 13, 14 players.
Yeah, so Talia Stauda, who was a very good player for Virginia when I watched her in college. I don't know what she's done this season with the Courage, but was a really good college player. She's joining the Sun for the rest of the calendar year, right? So for the rest of the fall season. So that will certainly help the depth issues at the back. The academy players, I know, were given the full second half of that friendly with Fort Lauderdale a week ago that you were at, James, partly in anticipation of this potential issue in terms of depth. So, but again, as you said, it was a shortened preseason. It was really a couple scrimmages and then that match. So, I think it'll take a while for everybody to find their feet, but, still, I think it was really encouraging that the Sun were as good as they were, after about minute 55. You're absolutely right. Dallas should have had 2 or 3 goals in the first half. They looked, they quite frankly looked as good as an NWSL side. If we want to talk about level of play, I know a lot of people who I talked to who are NWSL people said, oh, this will look like a minor league. At least based on the eye test in the first half, Dallas looked like an NWSL team. They looked very good to me. Maybe it's one game and you can't draw conclusions from one match, but I don't think the level of play may be as low as some of the critics or potential critics of this league thought it would be. But you have to be encouraged with how the Sun ended the match and being able to get that draw and actually create a few more chances in the last 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I would say when I was looking at just the rosters and going off of whatever you can glean from that, which is unfortunately little, it looked to me as though the 3 best teams, at least on paper, were possibly Carolina, Tampa Bay Sun, and then Dallas, obviously. And Dallas does have quite a few players at this point who are on loan from NWSL teams, so that is going to help them too. But I was definitely encouraged by the way that things went. I think that the improvements in the second half due to the changes that Denise Schulte-Brown instituted in the way that the team was attacking and the way that the team was also defending, of course, that obviously helped us out there. And then I think the other thing is both teams were getting tired. I've already mentioned the cramping issues, but Tampa Bay was able to ride that out a little bit better in the end. And maybe that's down to the youth players getting on the field. Maybe that's down to them just having more stamina because they're because they're younger players. But it was encouraging. We were able to fight our way back into the game. I'm sure that there are plenty of coaches who will point to the fact that it takes a lot out of you to experience all of the emotions that go into a first ever game and everything. But if you can show the resilience, that is where the best players show themselves, is how they can get punched in the face, so to speak. We gave up the first goal, and then still were able to come back and get ourselves back into the game, get a result out of it. It wasn't the win that we were all hoping for, but I think you could say, based off of the way that the game was going, if somebody was going to score later in the second half, it probably would have been the Tampa Bay Sun.
Yeah, I agree with that. And brilliant crowd. Brilliant way to start and I think engage that crowd and keep people interested in the team. North Carolina or Carolina Ascent broke the attendance record for the state of North Carolina for a professional women's soccer club match. So, we talk about the NC Courage as one of the elite clubs, maybe the signature club of NWSL. Their, highest attendance has now been broken by the Carolina Ascent. So what a start for USL Super League there. Carolina defeats DC Power 1-0. So let's move on to the Fort Lauderdale game, James. 1-1 draw in Spokane. Spokane were pretty good the first 30 minutes. They looked a better side. But eventually, it was kind of similar to the Tampa Bay game that you and I were both at. Fort Lauderdale in the second half took control of the match. Equalized behind Addison McCain and had a penalty shout that was denied that I know Joe Malfa and the commentators on the broadcast thought was probably a penalty. But the thing that I noticed about Fort Lauderdale, and we can compare this to Dallas, was that they became very comfortable in possession and moving the ball side to side, similar to what we saw with Dallas. And I think this is one thing that we're going to maybe see in this league with the pitches, because basically every team is playing on a bigger pitch. It's not like the USL Championship where we have all these teams in baseball stadiums. Although actually we haven't seen Lexington has kind of a pitch issue. So, but every other team is playing on a wider pitch or a longer pitch, and that was one of the things that stood out for me in the game we were at the oh my goodness, I just called them the Rowdies. In the Sun match, by the way, this is about the 5th time I've done that in the last couple of days, because and program. Tampa Bay Soccer is the Rowdies.
It's easy to get them mixed up.
Yeah.
And I've had to mentally make sure that I don't do that as well.
Yeah, and I'm dating myself, but I used to do that with the Mutiny also. I used to call them the Rowdies. So, and I think that was a common thing. A lot of people did that. Never quite got used to the Mutiny, and that's why I'm glad that the team now is called the Rowdies again.
Yes.
But the Sun match, I think we were commenting on the size of that pitch, right? You and I, and how it provided kind of a different feel than Al Lang, speaking of the Rowdies, where the pitch is a little wider, but it's not very long. So, even the Rowdies with the kind of advantages sometimes on in wide areas they would have with this season with Bodley and Mundromo and Pacifique, they sometimes get negated at home actually. But, this match was very interesting to watch just because I thought that the pitch, other than being turf, was conducive to possession football, which was the same thing we saw, as I said, in the Fort Lauderdale Spokane match.
Yeah, I was wondering because when I saw that Tyrone Mears, former player in the, I guess mostly the lower leagues in England, but also played in the Premier League and a little bit in MLS, when he was the manager, I didn't really have a good feel for how he was going to go about things because I only saw that apparently his coaching record beforehand was in Inter Miami's youth academy. So I didn't really have a good feel for it, but it was interesting to see exactly how it played out. Yeah,
and that was something that I had been tipped off about by a Burnley fan who told me, hey, Mears, because Mears played most of his career, much of his career with Burnley. At the time, Burnley was a yo-yo club, right? Now they're a yo-yo club again, but he was not part of the Burnley squad when they had that 6 or 7 year run in the Premier League. I think they were in the Premier League maybe 2 years. He was there, and the other 4 or 5 years they were in the Championship. But that he would be very much into a possession-based style. And I said, okay, well, maybe ideally you'd want to do that, but you're getting a hodgepodge of players in this league. You're getting players who are available. You're getting players who you might get on loan because the calendars are misaligned. But yeah, it was very clear the way he wants his team to play, the way Fort Lauderdale approach that first game. So this brings us to the last topic for the week, which I think is, we already saw a move today that we talked about earlier with the Sun. But one of the conversations I was having at the game on Sunday, and you may have had similar conversations, was that these are the teams now, but because of the way the season is structured and the NWSL season ending in November, and the winter break, maybe we're going to see a flurry of transfer activity and new players for the spring season. So it might be just getting through the first half of the season for many of these clubs.
Yeah, I would be shocked if when we get to the final months of the season, however it plays out, the teams that are involved are very, very dissimilar to what we're looking at right now. We already have the players who are here on loan. When we get to the end of the NWSL season, there will be either cuts or more players who want to go out on loan to maintain their fitness for this or that reason. And obviously, if the USL Super League season goes over a period that the NWSL would not be playing, then there's a good little window right there. Additionally, because they have lined themselves up with the calendar that the rest of the world use, and I think that this was one of the big reasons they chose to do that, at least that's what all indications are, is that many of these teams will in the future want to look to the transfer market when other teams are also available to play around in the transfer market, and they can maybe make their own sales and make their own purchases. And I think that the Tampa Bay Sun will probably need to take advantage of that, considering at least the depth that is available at the moment. But I would be, like I said, I would be shocked if we were the only ones who went into that market a little bit more. I think that there are plenty of teams, at least on paper, it looks like Lexington is a team that could definitely use some reinforcements. So I would expect that coming up.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of concern about Lexington, and that's something we'll get into in future weeks. Once we see them play, right? They didn't play this week. But
that's right.
Yeah, both them and Brooklyn, who are, ironically, two of the teams I've heard, there are three teams I've heard significant concerns about their roster builds, which were Lexington, Brooklyn, and DC. Now, in terms of DC, they acquitted themselves quite well against Carolina Ascent, although that we have to say that was just the first game, so we don't know how that roster will hold up. But there are significant concerns about those other two teams. And then I think when it comes to Fort Lauderdale, there was a view that they were probably not going to be quite as good as the three teams you mentioned earlier, right? That they had built out kind of a very utilitarian squad, so to speak, right? Without standout players, but still a deep enough squad with enough experience to be competitive. And that was the general sense of Spokane also. So we'll see if those perceptions hold up, but there certainly was an impression that there were three teams that would be at the top, which were the three teams you mentioned, and then two teams in the middle who played each other to a 1-1 draw, and then three teams at the bottom. So yeah, this is going to be a fun journey. James, I'm thrilled that you're joining us for this, and we will be back with everybody next week. Thank you for thank you for listening, and thank you for subscribing. James, real quickly, plug for RBLR.
Well, obviously you guys can catch me here if you're listening, but if you would like to hear specifically more about the Tampa Bay Rowdies, I am mostly doing that with RBLR Sports, and you can find us at RBLR Sports. It is just exactly what it sounds like on all the social medias, and then just like I said before, we cover the Sun, our podcast and writing, but we also do the Rays, the Bucks, the Lightning, and then, of course, the Rowdies. So, yeah, we do as much as we can for all of these teams. But if you'd like to get that information, that's where we are.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, one of the best sources of independent coverage of any USL Championship club you're going to find. So, and which has been a traditional thing from the Tampa Bay area. But before we close, I'll say this. When I was the NASL PR director, and was the PR director when we launched the league, so the comms director when we launched the league, that's why, as I mentioned, the first Rowdies game against Austin, that was a game I was at in my role. The best independent coverage consistently came from bloggers and podcasters in the Tampa Bay area, right? That was the market which always produced the best kind of soccer minds to analyze things. And I was hoping we could replicate that model in the other NASL markets, and it never quite came to fruition in some places. But yeah, RBLR has kept that tradition alive. So please check out what they're doing once a week. You can check it out on YouTube, and you can check it out via the podcast stream, and then obviously RBLR Sports on all the social media, as you mentioned.
That's right. Yep.
So we will be back next week. Thanks for listening.